In today's video, I'm talking about exercise modifications. Essentially, that means adapting an exercise and doing it in a slightly different way to how it's presented to you. At some point or another, we'll all have to do this, whether it's because we're getting a little bit older and we don't have the mobility or the flexibility to do a move in the way that we could when we were younger, because we're unfit, because perhaps carrying a bit more weight through midsection or in the bottom or somewhere, which means that it's difficult to get into the position and to be comfortable that you actually can hold that position to do an exercise. It could be that your body is just not created in the same way that the next person's is, and therefore that exercise looks very different on you when you're doing it, or that your arms or legs are just not long enough to get yourself into certain positions on the floor and still be able to bring your leg through or something like that. So we do need to have an element of, I guess, body awareness when we're doing exercises, but even just as important is knowing why we're doing a move, why we're doing an exercise. If we know what we're trying to achieve with an exercise, then we're a lot more receptive and a lot more adaptive to doing it in different ways. That can be daunting when you're, say, in a class situation and you look around and everyone is doing it in a different way to how your body wants to do that exercise. But you do need to be able to put your hand up and ask for a modification so that you can get the benefit of the exercise and essentially reap the benefits and feel it, feel the burn, feel that, the muscles being worked that you want to see worked with that exercise. What I will do now is run through a few different exercises for you and just show you, what the standard exercise looks like, and also some modifications that are available. And in each scenario, I want you to have a look at what we're essentially doing, which is working the same muscle groups, but just finding different ways of doing it so that it is a little bit more achievable, depending on what your current level of mobility, flexibility, fitness is, and so on. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Let me know how you go.
We're going to start with an exercise called Breaststroke, a Pilates exercise. And in this one, we're on the mat, face down, and going through a move which very much replicates a breaststroke swimming movement. The core is engaged. It's very important to make sure core is switched on, which is quite challenging to do when you're actually pressed down towards the floor. And as you can see, we're working through the shoulders and the upper back. This can be quite uncomfortable for people, who don't like having the chest pressed down on the floor, especially if you're a bit busty. And that's where variations such as having the Swiss ball is a good option. Having said that, this is actually a bit more challenging as well because you're having to stabilize at the same time. So it does actually make the exercise just a little bit harder in other ways. But other easier options are either to be on your knees, one or two knees, or even on a chair, leaning forward and actually going through the same movement pattern. It does actually work the upper back just a little bit differently than being completely in a horizontal or closer to the ground in that respect, but you're still getting most of the benefits of the move by doing it that way. Our next exercise is a single straight leg stretch, and this is another Pilates exercise where we're lying down on our back. We're starting in tabletop, curling up, so we're holding that curl through the lower abdominal area, and the legs are going out and back, straightening and bending them, ensuring that you keep them completely parallel. So there's a lot of work that the pelvis has to do so that you're staying actually stable through this. This is an awkward position for people who perhaps have osteoporosis or osteopenia, where you're not allowed to curl up, but you can actually just keep your head on the ground and do the same exercise. So your core is still working to make sure that you're keeping that stability through your pelvis, extending the legs out and back. Often when you're starting out, or if you're a little bit heavier in the legs, it's challenging to actually hold yourself up in that position, both legs off the ground. And that's where actually doing the exercise by bringing one leg back down again, then lifting the other one is a good alternative, as is also doing it with the Swiss ball, because you can then just rest your feet on the ball. A progression on this exercise is to actually do the same move but faster, and then also add the oblique curls. So you, as well as trying to keep the hips completely stable so they're not moving, you're adding rotation in the upper body. On to the next exercise, the plank, which everyone will know. So this is a whole body exercise, really. The core works quite hard, and it's very much an endurance exercise. You're really trying to hold it for as long as you can without actually getting that dip in your hips that can compromise the lower back. So the classic position is to actually do it on your wrists. You've got a straight line going from the tip of your head down to your heels. To start off, you can actually start on your knees, and then a progression is to actually lift one knee off the floor and then alternate lift the other knee off the floor and keep doing that. And as you get stronger and stronger over time, you can get to the point where you're doing it on your toes completely. An easier variation is to do it leaning against a chair or a bench or a wall, or to do it on your forearms, especially if you've got wrist issues. So that's another way you can actually do the exercise. To actually make this one a bit more challenging, you can start doing things such as lifting alternative feet off the floor, alternative arms, and adding rotation through there. We're moving on to the single leg lift, which is a glute exercise. I like to do these in this position on the floor because you tend to isolate the glute muscles a lot more without other muscles also having to engage at the same time. But another variation on this is to also do it with your shoulder off the floor. So you've got your weight on your forearm, trying to make sure that you keep that core switched on so it doesn't sag. We then go into our knee exercises where you're doing essentially the same move, but you're actually balancing on one knee. And this gets significantly harder because the stabilizing glutes and leg also is working pretty hard, so you can tire quite quickly. As you can see, it's also quite challenging if you've got short arms. So this is a move that many people don't actually like doing for that reason, because the reach is not very easy for them. And let's just squeeze one more in, which is the side plank, the lift with the obliques. So in this one, we're working through the sides of our body, our obliques. So we're trying to essentially just keep our waist off the floor, get our hips off the floor. So trying to get to the point where we can do with both, the hips off the floor. Sometimes people can't even lift the hips on the floor, in which case you're really just focusing on trying to get that oblique movement going through there. And as you can see, a variation there is to get to the point of progressing to the point where you can just have one leg on the floor, or even doing rotations in that sort of exercise. So the takeout here is that it's absolutely okay to modify the moves, because essentially you just want to be getting out of the best of the exercise that you're doing, and just ensure that you focus on engaging the intended muscles, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.